Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone. Today is the Drinking Water Fee Stakeholder meeting. My name is David Ceccarelli from the Division Administrative Services. Joining me today on my right is one of my fee managers, John Ware, and also the Deputy Director of the Division of Drinking Water, Darren Pohemus. Just a few housekeeping rules before we go ahead and get started. In case of emergency, we're asked to exit the doors, go down the stairs, and then meet at the park. And then once they ask us to return, we'll come back. Restrooms out the door to the left, and there's a cafeteria on the first floor. This meeting is being webcast, so for those that are asking questions in the room, we'll be passing a mic around. Those that are online and want to ask a question, the email address is on our website, it's on our agenda that went out. And that email is das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Again, it's das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. There are agendas, handouts on the back table. If you haven't already, there's a sign-in sheet. Our last meeting was in March. So this is the second meeting, and in the whole budgeting process here, basically what you'll see in this fund condition and cost drivers are basically coming out of the governor's May revise budget, and of course they're in the process right now of finalizing the budget for fiscal year 1920. So just going over the agenda a little bit, we'll go over some of the budget change proposals. The first two, A and B, were part of the January proposed budget, and we went over and discussed those and talked a little bit about the impacts of those in our last meeting. And then budget change proposal C, the Inyo County budget change proposal that was put in and was part of the May revise budget process. We'll also go over a little bit of the Safe Drinking Water Fund condition, let you look at that, kind of show you where we're at on that. Not many changes. Of course, there's a little bit of a update because of budget change proposal C that's in there. And then we've basically just put a chart at the back that kind of goes over the impacts of some of the proposed fees and various public water systems, just kind of showing some examples of what the proposal would impact to the fee payers. And then we have an open discussion. However, again, if at any point in our discussion, please ask any questions. We're kind of light on the room this morning. And if anyone has any emails, again, staff is checking right now and she'll notify us at that time. So we'll go ahead and start. John, if you want to go ahead and just kind of give us an overview and talk a little bit about the cost drivers and what's kind of gone in from last year's Budget Act to kind of building where we're at right now.
Yeah, you bet. So our item number 2 is our cost drivers. That's attachment 1 in your handouts. The top portion shows the funding for the drinking water program. This is slightly different than what we saw back in March when we last met, which was based on the governor's January budget. The changes before us now come from the May revised budget and include an additional budget change proposal related to county primacy delegation revocation. That increased the drinking water budget by $386,000. The top line itself, again, is the drinking water fund. That's, of course, what's supporting by our fees. The middle section here compares the budget we enacted this year with the May revised budget. That's a total increase this year of about $1.9 million. That is over last fiscal year. If you look at the bottom, that's a breakdown of cost drivers that are affecting the fund for 1920. As you can see, the primary cost drivers are the 3 budget change proposals. The drinking water system sanitary survey, increased drinking water laboratory services, and as I mentioned, the Inyo County delegation revocation.
So if I could just add there just for a second, just kind of go over a couple of things there. There, as I kind of mentioned in the Water Quality and Water Rights Program, and most of you are aware of it, there was a space optimization BCP put in last year. It was about over $6 million or so. And each of the funds had a portion. So they were the expenditures were hit in last year's fiscal year in like 18-19, and so there's a negative amount being taken out in 19-20 for the safe drinking water account. One other adjustment also, you may see it down there on the bottom there in the last little table, which is a baseline budget adjustment for our federal set-aside state revolving fund portion of $530,000. Basically, there was a reduction in the federal funding, basically, and what Department of Finance has done is just basically adjusted our authority by that amount to match those two moving forward. So basically, the growth of the program basically is about $1.8 million or almost $1.9 million from the Budget Act to the May revised budget moving forward. So are there any questions? Darren is up here if there's any questions on the budget change proposals for 19-20. Want to add on those? Okay, so we'll go ahead and look at the fund condition.
I was told my microphone didn't work, so I have this now. Yes, for our fund condition, attachment 2, we use this. It's useful because it shows us what the revenue and expenditures look like for the last few years, including this year and next year for fiscal year 19-20. As you've heard us say before, throughout the year, we look at the balance of the revenue expenditures within the fund to determine if we can maintain a prudent reserve based on the amount of appropriation. What we're looking here, as David said, is very similar to what we, when we last met in March. Our goal here is to demonstrate where we anticipate the Safe Drinking Water Fund will be at the end of this fiscal year, what it means for next year if we take no action, and what we're proposing to do to shore up the fund. At the end of this year, we're anticipating a budget deficit of nearly $2 million. That said, if you look closely enough, you'll see that the ending balance is definitely enough on the positive side to cover our reserve and or to cover our gap. And of course, what gets left over every year transfers to next year. So we look at what happens next year. If we have no fee increase, the cost drivers scheduled for next year are going to make the budget deficit worse, so much so that we anticipate the ending balance going down to about 1%. This doesn't give us much of an ability to absorb any economic uncertainties or other contingencies. So if you look in the last column, what we're proposing here is a 10% fee increase that would generate about $2.5 million in revenue. That's enough to shore up the fund and deliver a more prudent reserve of nearly 10%. Of this $2.5 million increase, just over $2.3 million, or about 93%, is result of the budget change proposals. The remainder is employee compensation, and as David mentioned, in part because of the other factors that contribute to our end budget. Our decision here to propose a 10% increase would allow a more gradual approach because even if you look at what we're proposing next year, there's still going to be, on paper, a deficit. And instead of covering it by doing a full increase of 15%, we're looking and proposing at a 10% increase that will more gradually bring up the fees to match our expenditures. Partly, we want to make it easy for fee payers. Also, we don't want to be too aggressive because there are a lot of unknowns that are going on, and overstepping it may not be necessary. So I'll bring it back over here to David.
So, yeah, over the last couple of years, we've been, again, able to kind of offset increases again with the reserve. And as you can see, the reserve is, at one point was around 30%, drawn down about 24, anticipating this year being around the 15-16% mark. And then now moving forward with some of these cost drivers that have ramped up our expenditures, we definitely do need an increase. And as John mentioned, about a 15% increase would basically cover our revenue or generate sufficient revenue to cover our total expenditures. But because we have about a 15% reserve, and we in this fund we try to draw around 10%, we're more or less at this point staff's proposing a 10% increase, and our right now the 10% will be spread off on all fee categories in the fee structure. And of course, that's something that, internally we can discuss in it if there's something that you guys may see where maybe there are some areas maybe you want to keep stagnant and not increase those, then we'd have to kind of look at kind of what other areas we would do to make that up. But yeah, I think it's just important that even though we do this increase of 10%, you'll still see a structural deficit in the program about $1.4 million. But again, it still maintains our 10% reserve and then gives us an opportunity to see how the year plays out in 1920, and then allows us to kind of evaluate how we'd move forward into 2021. Any questions on anything on the room? We'll have a mic passed to you there.
Hello, Adam Borchard, Association of California Water Agencies. I've got the printout from the March 26th, the first stakeholder meeting. I noticed that the numbers for the fee increase for 9% is the same as for this handout's numbers for the 10% increase. I was just wondering if you could clarify that.
Yeah, so I think it did go from 9 to 10, and it's basically the $386,000, the new budget change proposal that was put in for the Inyo counties. It did gradually move it slightly more to the 10%, so we're kind of rounding it up to 10.
So if we move to attachment 3 and take a look at what the impact of these proposed fees are, we can see in this table a breakdown of various representative fee payers. David mentioned what we're proposing is an increase that's spread over all fee categories across the board, an even 10%. We do this in part for simplicity and making sure that everyone is on the same footing. If you look at the first 4 lines for a community water system, the minimum payer, disadvantaged community water systems under 100, at 10% is only $10 a year. That is the current fee of 100 plus the 10% is 110. A minimum payer would be, say, an average community water system, service connections under 41. Their fee is $250. That goes up $25. A median type system, that is what we find is the median community water ratepayer, would be looking at a current fee of about $1,398. That moves up to $1,537. Again, a straightforward $140 net increase. Overall average, when we include the highest payers and down to the lowest, we have a mathematical average, comes out to about just shy of 20,000. You look at the last 5 lines, we're seeing the 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and largest fee payers, and what that 10% is going to mean in an actual dollar amount net increase. Our 5th largest, the SFPUC City Distribution Division is looking at just shy of $25,000 annual increase. The largest, Los Angeles City Department of Water and Power, they're looking at just over $93,000 annual increase. And again, everything is set for a straight 10% increase.
So again, this is, again, a concept that basically to looking at and say we need, generate about 10% more in revenue for the program based on our cost. And one way of looking at it is spreading all of our categories over by 10%. Again, some of them, like the transient non-water systems and some of the categories, when they came over, they did not see any fee increases. So again, this would capture all categories. We're definitely open to feedback, and if you'd like to send us a letter or send us an email, definitely be open to that. Again, there's that, it's almost kind of one of those ways that you kind of slice the pie, right? Figuring out, how we generate an additional 10% revenue. So I just kind of want to, again, open it up, and if anyone wants to provide any feedback, or again, as you start looking at these numbers, want to respond, send us a letter, would be definitely want to listen to that feedback.
We'd also like to add that if there are any ideas that you would like to share with us, that you submit those by no later than July 15th, so that we can in turn take time to process and examine, so that when we meet again in August, we'll have some way of communicating to you what that feedback meant to us. Thank you. Any other? Oh, we have another question.
And Borchard again with Aqua. So in terms of next steps, you mentioned the July 15th deadline to submit comments. I think August 7th is the third stakeholder meeting. And then when's the proposed adoption date by the board?
I believe it's September 17th, which is our second board meeting in September. And so we'll be taking a proposal to the board for the consideration and adoption at that point. And of course, 10 days prior to that, the staff report will come out listing the proposals and basically kind of describing, of course, what will be presented and discussed at that meeting. So if there's
No other
nothing else, I don't think nothing's online. Anything, Darren, you'd like to share, add? Okay. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending today's meeting. We do have a question here, so.
Yeah, I'm Mark Emerson with the Carmichael Water District. I was previously employed here for 9 years with the state board. I do have a couple of questions with regard to the numbers that were in the original BCP for calendar year 2017. I noticed that 2017 had approximately 1,172 sanitary inspections done. And again, the proposal is being driven by the need, apparent EPA increase requirement going to 88% of sanitary inspections done within a particular period of time. And that we're looking at a backlog that is contributing significantly to the work, that contributes to the workload, and therefore the need for an increase in the number of staff that is available to do this particular work, if I'm not correct. With that in mind, and taking a look at the fiscal year, in the calendar year of 1152, with a current 132 staff people who are available for sanitary inspections, if you do the math, you're looking at approximately 0.71 inspections done per month of sanitary inspections. Are these numbers accurate? Is that the number of inspections that are done on a monthly basis on an average for the state? And secondly, how much of that is in-plant inspection sanitary and survey inspection versus the amount of time that is spent writing a report. And then I would also question what is the lag time between submittal of the report until a final completion of the report, meaning to say it's gone through the number of reviews that have been done by the various supervisors, if indeed there have been problems encountered, or if there's something that needs to be addressed by the water system and they have to go back and forth a little bit, more questions arise. So those are the questions I would have. And if those could be taken a look at by, by the various districts, especially as they relate to disadvantaged communities, whether, Sacramento is blessed with not having disadvantaged communities, but as you go down to Fresno, Tulare area and so forth, we start looking at the 20% of those community water systems that contribute to about 80% of the problems. But anyway, that analysis would be very helpful for me to understand, being a water system that has budgeted $26,000 and now $40,000 for permitting and sanitary inspection work a year, and now I see it going up again. And those would be the questions I would have. My hypothesis is that the division may not be as efficient as it could be in doing the inspection work. Having worked there for 9 years, I know a little something about sanitary inspections and the reports that are generated. And I submit that there are far better models that could be looked at in order to do these sanitary surveys and to assure the public's health. That's about it. I'd be more than happy I as a water system would be more than happy, and understanding what a water system can and can't do, and some that are good and some that are bad or have problems. But it may be a factor also of resource allocation, of how you're allocating resources to look at fairly good water systems, whereas they may be unnecessary. So that's another element that I would very much look at and question. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple comments to your response. Just to be very clear, the increase that you've seen over time that you mentioned from 26 to 40,000 for Carmichael, that is not all sanitary survey adjustments, correct? Okay, good. Yeah, so some portion of that has been. I've never done the math to come out with the 0.7. Instead, we tend to look at it a little bit more on the hourly basis and the total tracking, and we do track it very close. We are making measures to try to be and continuously improve our efficiency and not just hire staff. That is one of our important things that we've done. We've been undergoing a pilot of how to do kind of electronic forms while we do the inspections of small water systems. And that's still kind of playing out to whether it actually speeds us up or not. We think it does for really small systems because you can get back to the office and do a quick report. But we noticed, though, is when you go to a large systems, they're so complex that the checklist is actually becomes cumbersome, and it didn't work out well there. So there's that. We are undertaking a measure to try to make sure that our districts are uniform in the amount of care they give to the inspection report. There are definitely variances between the different district offices. Some of them want to write a novella about their inspection, which may not be necessary. Others are much more efficient, and that is a measure that's underway as well to try to make sure we continue to do that. So it's stayed pretty steady about our time. We still track staff time expenditures, and it's running right around 60% of a field staff's time are spent on all of the sanitary survey activities from inspection to reporting. So that's been our basis. And we saw an actual, kind of remarkably close increase with the 10 positions we received from a previous BCP to change our sanitary survey backlog and get our results from 76 to into the 84 range. It's almost exactly what we predicted based on the mathematical calculations we'd done on how much staffing increase that would be. So we're hoping for a very similar response here as well to try to catch that up. So your comments are well taken. We definitely want to be an efficient as we can. But being a regulator my entire life, anytime I show up at a water system or a wastewater system when I used to be there, 5 minutes was too long for them for the most part. So it's always a bit of give and take on, what we find and how helpful we are. And so we encourage the feedback on that. I should mention as well that this increase won't get us to US EPA's standard of expectation. And, they have an expectation that we're not, there is no backlog and we're 100%. We're really striving to try to get above the 90% number. I don't think this BCP will quite get us there, but we'll see how close we can get. And like I say, we're trying to add these other efficiency measures to drive that as well. So it is an ongoing stretch to try to balance those. And of course, we want recommendations from water systems on the usefulness of what we provide as far as the sanitary surveys. I think we're increasing now to add, there's like 9 deficiencies that we can highlight when we're at water systems that we're really focusing on and keeping a record of those. So those will be ongoing. And each year we try to focus on some different components of the inspection to make sure it's not just the same. There's so much to look at. We actually, to do a nut to bolt, every aspect of a sanitary survey, a real thorough job would take much longer than we spend now. So we tend to try to focus on different parts each year as we're at the water system so that we are efficient and that we're, making sure we catch big things, but then digging in on some particular topic each time so that it's not everything, because it could be much longer when especially the ones that need the help.
So I'll just check one more time. Any questions online? Any further questions in the room? Well, again, I appreciate everyone participating. If you have any questions or concerns or like any more additional feedback, please let us know. You can reach out to one of us. And again, our next drinking water meeting will be held on August 7th. Thank you.